G'day everybody, welcome to lesson 3 of part 2. Again, it's part 2 of lesson 3, which is part 2 of programming fun. And I really need to work on the naming of my videos and my topics, but whatever, we're here. And we're going to talk about the next two design diagrams, namely the context diagram and the data flow diagram. Now, these two diagrams, we're going to dive deep into looking at how the user sort of interacts with our program, what data goes in, what comes out, where that's stored, all that kind of stuff. And the first diagram we look at is context diagram. Again, this is a little bit like the IPO diagram in terms of it is big picture stuff. It shows the users who are going to use our program. It shows our program in the middle, and it shows how the data sort of goes from one place to another. Okay, and we'll look at some examples in a second, but I want to introduce you to the icons of our level 0 or context diagram. There are circles. Just as you can see here, there is arrows that you write your data on top of or below, and there is rectangles that represent our external entities, which are users or other businesses that our program interacts with. So let's quickly jump into a diagram because I feel like people learn better with examples, and then you can write down the symbols. Come on, click, and let me move my big fat head over. All right. We in this diagram are looking at a voting system, and our voting system is sitting in our process circle in the middle. So with a context diagram, it's quite often you only see a single circle which represents all the software and all of the hardware. And this is unique to the context diagram. Just one circle, system name in the middle, simple as that. Then you have the rectangles or the squares on the outside, which are essentially the users or anyone that you would interact with. So we've got the candidates for our voting system and their details. As you can see, if you follow our data flow line down and in, the arrowheads are very important, by the way. Make sure they're pointing the right direction. That indicates that the candidates are sending inputs into our voting system. So somewhere in our input or IPO diagram, there would be candidate details. And in the context diagram where we're now thinking of, where do they come from? Well, they come from the candidates themselves. So that's an input into our system, and you write on the line the candidates' details that they're providing to our system. Okay, I've hammered on about that. Then we've got another external entity, our voters. Well, they interact with our voting system. Of course they do. They provide their details and their actual vote. And so that input line indicates the voters' details and their vote going into the voting system. Okay, now but there's another arrow coming back. So that's an output, something that's coming out of our system. Again, on our IPO diagram, confirmation will be written under the O column to indicate the confirmation going back to the voter. Okay, so you can see the context diagram sort of takes the next step from an IPO diagram. It actually looks at, well, okay, there's an output, but who is it going to? Sometimes you can have 15 different outputs, and they're all going to different places, but the IPO diagram doesn't show that. The context diagram does. And then we've got one more little external entity, the public. The rest of the general public, they get the election results from our software. So output election results into the public so they can see what was the result of the voting. Okay, so you can see our three little icons in full action here. The process is just like the entire system, hardware, software, everything. The arrows represent the data flows, inputs, and the outputs from our external entities, which often are people who use our system, but it can often be external businesses like banks. If your system has got handling processes or handling processing of money, often you would use a bank for that. So you would have an external entity to represent the bank to process those payments. Okay, so let's jump forward. Testing yourself. We're going to jump into our Canteen app. Okay, I want you to draw a context diagram. You should have one process for the entire Canteen app. So we're not thinking about the one screen now. I want you to think about the entirety of the app. You should have an external entity for the student, an external entity for the Canteen staff, some data flows connecting the students and the staff with that system in the middle. And then I want you to write the inputs from the students, the outputs to the students, and then the inputs to the Canteen staff, and if there's any outputs, and etc. So again, I'm going to pause, and so are you guys, and you're going to draw your own context, and then I'll jump into whiteboard and we'll have a go. Okay, welcome back. I hope you've had a go. Let's jump into the deep end. So the first thing I would quickly recommend when you're doing a context diagram, specifically context, I emphasize that because data flows are similar, but not similar enough. The first thing I would do is write the name of the app in the middle, such as Canteen app, and then I would draw, oh my God, I can't do circles. I should use the shapes down here. Let's get a circle. I don't want to. I've already written it, Microsoft. Okay, beautiful. Now, how do I move it? Cool. Now, the reason I emphasize write, then do the circle is often I have students, they will draw a lovely, whoop, thank you for that, Microsoft. They'll draw a lovely circle like that, and then they will like write Canteen app, and I just can't write it. So please make sure you use the right thing. Okay, let's see if this eraser is actually going to do its job. Beautiful. Okay, so we've got our process in the middle. We've got our Canteen app ready to go. Let's get some external entities. Let's draw the shapes first. So one rectangle is going to have to be the students. And then one rectangle is going to be the staff or the canteen staff. You can write either one. Okay, with that said and done, what we need to do now is think about, all right, how do we connect these two things together? Okay, how are we going to connect the students to the app and the staff to the app? Well, it's pretty straightforward. First thing, let's grab a line, draw it going into the Canteen app. What do the students provide for the Canteen app? Well, they provide their details, okay, payment, because we're just going to assume that this app is communicating with the bank directly and those kind of things. And finally, what their order is. That's probably the more important thing is they want meat pie, they want a cheeseburger, all that kind of stuff. Now, what do they get out of the software? Now, you might be tempted to write food, but realistically, the food comes from the staff. So, but what do they get back? They get confirmation of their order, and they might get an invoice or a receipt, whatever you want to call it, that kind of stuff, coming back to the students. Now, what do the staff get? Well, they get the orders. They get the order info. Okay, who's the student? What do they order? Those kind of things. Do the staff put anything into the canteen? Well, they might put, maybe a new special comes up, specials. What about food items? Maybe they get new food items on the menu, that kind of stuff. That's what they put into the app. Now, there is one more external entity if you want to get very, very picky, and I've already sort of mentioned it. So let's quickly add in a rectangle. And that external entity would be the bank. Okay, the bank is what's going to handle all the hard work when it comes to things like handling payments and all that. So let's move this down. So the Canteen app is going to send the payment info to the bank, and the bank is going to simply send back confirmation or if it worked or it didn't work. Okay, and there is our context diagram for our Canteen app. And again, context diagrams are just that. They are putting everything into context. Okay, and this is where things are going to get a little bit complicated because we're going to dive into the data flow or the DFD diagram. Okay, a data flow diagram is essentially like the next step. Okay, we've got our context diagram, but now we need to look at what are the individual processes from our IPO diagram that are going on. Where is the data going to be stored as well? So there's a little bit more work involved in a data flow. There are similar icons. As you can see, we've still got our process, we've still got our external entities, and we've still got our data flow lines, but we've now got this three-sided rectangle. Now, it doesn't matter if this side or the other side is open. It's the same symbol, but it indicates data storage. It could be a text file. It could be a database. It could even be a filing cabinet, for God's sake, or a set of sticky notes on someone's desk. Wherever you're storing your data, it goes into that open rectangle like that. Okay, so these are our four symbols. There's one quick thing I want to point out before we look at our example. The process isn't just representing the whole system anymore. We are representing how the inputs become outputs or how the data gets stored. So a quick example of that, in the last one, the Canteen app was just one big circle and everything went into the one circle. Well, now the Canteen app would be broken into multiple bubbles. One bubble would be making the orders, one bubble would be processing the payments, another one would be emailing staff about the orders that have been made, all that kind of stuff. So no longer do we see one bubble, we now have multiple processes in our system. Now, this example data flow diagram is a really simple data flow for searching for songs on Spotify. So as you can see, I've got one external entity, I've now got 3 processes and 1 data store. Okay, this isn't, as one of my students put it, this isn't the screenshot of a diagram with the edge cut off, that is the data store icon. So the user would send in a search term, which then sends it onto the database to have a look at what songs are in the database, and it would send back the results to another process, which would format them in a nice, pretty little way that the user can see. And then finally, the user would choose a song, which then is played by Spotify. So this is a really, really simple search, see your results, play a song kind of thing from Spotify. Okay, and again, the external entities are the same. You can have businesses or people in data flows. The processes, though, are now just individual like chunks of code that are going to process inputs and outputs. And these 3-sided rectangles are where you store your data. Okay, now that's a much more complicated one using the voting system that we had before. Let's have a quick look. Okay, we've got the 3 external entities still exist. There's the voters, the candidates, and the public. Let's start with the candidates because that's what we did last time. So the candidates send their details into the nomination process, and those details are then stored inside this endorsed candidates database. The voters send in their vote to a vote process, which is saved in here. They get the list of candidates as well. And then there is an electoral roll, so in other words, where the voters' details are stored to say this voter has voted or not. And the result is sent back here, which goes back to the user as confirmation. You're going to see that a lot. And then the last thing we've got is all the details and the votes are brought together into this results process, which is sent to the public. So you'll notice that external entities in a data flow diagram don't talk to databases. And that's for security reasons. Code needs to talk to databases, not people. Okay, and you'll also notice again that data doesn't go straight to people, it has to go through a process again. So you'll often see that inputs go to a circle, then go to a data store, or output goes to a process and then goes to an external entity. So let's go back to our Canteen app very quickly. Let's have a look at the external entities. Let's have a look at the data stores. Let's have a look at the processes and the data flows. So I want to see 2 external entities again, student and staff. I want to see 2 data stores, or maybe 1, depending on how you want to structure it, for the orders and then the menu for the Canteen. I want to see at least 2 processes for viewing the menu and ordering the food. And I want to see the data flow lines connecting them all together. So pause the video, have a go, and then I'll do it on the whiteboard again. Okay, we are back. Let us draw our diagram. The first thing is I want to think about the external entities. I always tend to start with the rectangles because I find it a little bit easier. So I'm going to try and structure it similar to the last one. We'll put staff on the left-hand side. We'll put students on the right-hand side. Why did that make a tiny one? Whatever. Okay, we'll put students over here. And the first thing I think of is, all right, what inputs do my external entities provide for my whole system? Well, the simplest one, again, is the student details. So actually, I'm not going to write student details. My undo is not working, and I don't appreciate it, Microsoft. Okay, let's just get that. So let's just put details. What was it? It was payment and order. Okay, that is now going to go into, well, not now because it was the same in the last one. It's going to go to a process, but this time the process is now going to be named. Okay, so let's call this create order. And we need to think about, all right, so now all the details have gone into here. Where are they going to end up? Where is the basically the end result for this stuff? Well, it's going to go to a data store. And I'm going to put it at the top here, and I'll tell you why in a second. So a 3-sided rectangle. And this is going to be the orders database. Like so. What info is going into there? Again, it's going to be the details. And it's going to be the order as well. It goes into the database. Now, where does that go? Once it's in the database, well, it needs to get to the staff. But again, you cannot connect a data store and an external entity, or you shouldn't. It's going to go through a process. So let's go orders. They go into a circle. Okay, and I'm just going to call this one print orders. So you just imagine like there's a bit of paper, and we'll just call this report. So you imagine there's a bit of paper that just goes straight to the staff that says you got 15 orders to make for lunch. Okay, that's what I'm talking about there with the print orders. Now, the other thing I want to quickly touch on, we've got payments that disappeared when it went into the orders database. And that's because it's got to go to its own process down here. So let's get another circle, pop it there, make it smaller. And I'm going to call this process payment. And this guy is going to take the payment details and it's going to contact the bank. So lots of back and forth. And I'll tell you why I drew all those lines in a second. So payment, just writing the same words again and again, but that's fine. External entity. This is the bank that's handling all the FPOS and all that kind of stuff. I was about to write Commonwealth. Again, I undo. Sorry about this, guys. Nice and slow process today. All right, bank. And they're simply going to send us back confirmation because they handle everything else on their end. And the confirmation is going to go all the way back to this process. And the confirm is going to go back to the student as well. That's a bit messy. I probably should have spaced it out more, but there we go. So this is the main setup. There is one chunk that is missing though. On this test yourself page, I said I want you to have a data store for the menu. So the students should be able to essentially scroll through the menu of different items. So let's do it up here. Okay, well actually there's not going to be any error going. Oh my God, no inputs, no undos. Okay, we're going to have a view process like so. Bonk. Just plonk that there over the top, make it a bit smaller. Okay, and that data has got to come from a menu database. So this is where all of our food exists. And let's just put menu items, and that's got to go down to the students. Menu items. So that would include names, prices, categories, all that kind of stuff. So there is a really basic data flow diagram for our Canteen app, and it includes all the things that I talked about. Now I haven't included like the staff adding specials, I haven't included adding new items, all that kind of stuff. But let's just keep it simple for today. It's your first time. So hopefully at the end of this video, you understand a bit more about context diagrams and data flow diagrams. In the next video, because this is getting long, we're going to look at structure charts and data dictionaries. So I'll see you in that one.